So today we are going to start talking about other ways of invoking Apex, right? So Apex code, we have seen two different ways of calling Apex code. One is through the controllers, which are used in Visual Force pages, and then the other was on the DML operations, right? So you can execute your Apex code through Visual Force pages by writing controllers, and then you can also execute Apex code on DML operations with the help of triggers. Okay, now we are going to look into a few more ways of invoking Apex. What are other different ways of invoking Apex? So the next thing, the most simplest one is the anonymous code block. What is anonymous code block? Anonymous code block is a simple concept where you just kind of write the code and you want to execute it. No saving, nothing. You have written a piece of code and you just want to execute it. That's it. The reason can be anything. You want to try the code. You are just writing a code which is to be run one time. You are writing a code which changes dynamically. So you don't want to save it because every time you execute that code, you'll have to change it. So reason can be anything, but in case I have an Apex code which needs to be executed once and I don't want to save it, then I don't need to go ahead, create a class, method, nothing like that. All that you have to do is just write the Apex code, execute it. Okay, and for doing that, we do it through anonymous code block. Okay, now where do we find or where do we write anonymous code block?
Sorry, can you repeat that last bit again?
Sorry.
Can you please repeat that last bit about anonymous code block? When do we actually use it? When we
What is the last thing that you could hear? Can they give me the password?
Yeah, sending.
Yeah, microphone muted, please. Please mute the microphone. Yeah. What is the last thing you could hear, Naren?
Jeet, your voice is cutting out.
Okay.
Sorry, say that again, please.
Meeting will end in 5 minutes.
Is it fine now?
Hello. Yeah, it is fine now.
Okay, Jeet, it is fine. Sorry, I missed the whole bit. It was cutting out your voice.
Okay. No problem. I'll tell
I
you. Okay. Now the voice is okay.
Yeah, it is fine now.
Okay. So anonymous code block is an Apex code that you just want to execute one time. All right, and you don't want to save it. Okay, so that's something which we are going to write as anonymous code block. When we are talking about a controller, what are we doing? We are writing the code and we are saving it as a class. When we are
Yes.
talking about Apex trigger, what are we doing? We are saving the code, right? Why are we saving it? Because this is the code which needs to be used repeatedly. Every time the record gets
Okay.
saved, this code should be executed. Every time
Yep.
someone loads the page, the code needs to be executed. Every time someone clicks on the button, that code needs to be executed, right? But every Apex code is not going to be this kind of code. Some Apex code can be that I just want to execute it once, so I don't need to store that code. That doesn't need to be saved either in a method or a class or in a trigger, nowhere, right? It's a one-time
Okay.
execution. Now reason for that one-time execution can be anything. Sometimes you want to try and test a code, whether how it is performing or how it is working. Sometimes the reason can be that you have a code which needs to be changed uh, very frequently, so you don't want to save it because anyhow next time when you're going to execute it you need to change some part of the code. Sometimes the situation can be that you are just required to run it one time. The code needs to be executed only once. You don't need that code to be executed very frequently, or or never maybe. So in those cases, you don't need to create a class or method or a trigger or something like that. All that you have to do is you just have to write the code as an anonymous code block. Where do you write this? You just have to go to your Salesforce, click on your name, go to developer console. In developer console you have to, that opens up this window for you. Here you have to go to debug and you have to open execute anonymous window. So under debug there is open execute anonymous window. This is where you can write whatever code you want and you can execute the code. Let's say I want account A equals new account, name equals IBM India, insert A. Okay, if I execute it, this code will get executed and it will create a new account with name IBM India. So you can just go ahead and say execute. Spelling is wrong. Yes, now it's correct. No phone. So that's the custom validation error. So let me just turn off the validation tool for the time being.
Sir, it is a trigger actually. I created for that phone number.
So which object you do not have these validations and triggers and all these things?
Every object I have. I think
So I'll
we can
use some
disable
other
it.
object. I'll
Yeah.
use some other login. Naren, you want to share your login ID password? If you do not have that much of
Yep.
customization done, because that ways it will be difficult. We'll have to deactivate too many things. Please send me login ID password.
Okay. Yep. Okay. So that is
Deactivated, sir.
Chalo, I've logged in.
Mm.
Okay. Microphones on mute once again, please. Thank you. All right. So the same stuff, you just need to go to click on your name, go to developer console. On the developer console, you can go and write your code. So go to debug, open execute anonymous, and here you can just write so let me write the same thing, count a equals count name equals IBM insert a, execute. Now that code got executed. Fine. Now if I go to account, I can see this. See, just now this account got created, right? So this code is not saved anywhere, but I can execute the code. If I just want to execute any code once, I can go and write that code in the anonymous code window. Fine. Okay. Now that's about an anonymous code block. Now coming to the next type of Apex, this is basically, there are 2-3 different types of ways of invoking Apex, and we will call them asynchronous Apex. Okay, what is asynchronous Apex? Asynchronous Apex is just a concept. Okay, it's not a way of writing Apex, but it's just a concept that you need to understand. See, there are two types of Apex. One is synchronous Apex, the other is asynchronous Apex. Any ideas that you want to
I'm unable to see the notepad.
Yeah, notepad is not see.
now you can see it.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are two types of Apex basically, concept wise: synchronous and asynchronous Apex. Any ideas you can make out from the name? What will be synchronous Apex and what will be asynchronous Apex? Whatever, whatever thing, whatever comes to mind, can you think of what may be the difference between
Something,
synchronous and asynchronous?
synchronous would be something kind of logical. It has got a step-by-step process. Asynchronous doesn't need to be in order, maybe.
Yes. Okay. So we can again mute the microphones. I hear a lot of noise. I do not know whose microphone, but too much of noise. Okay. So, yeah, correct. As Naren was saying, synchronous is something which is step by step. So it's a synchronized Apex. Okay. And asynchronous Apex is something which is not in sync. Right. Now, so far, whatever Apex we have done, it's all synchronous Apex. Synchronous means
Yep.
when you click on a button, the Apex gets executed. When you load a page, the Apex gets executed. So it's in sync with something else, right? The page is getting loaded, Apex gets executed. You click on a button, Apex gets executed. You save a record, Apex gets executed. You update a record, Apex is getting executed, right? So everything is in a synchronous way, right? Anonymous code block is also synchronous because the moment you click on execute, then it gets executed, right? So it's also in sync with that particular execute button click. Now there can be situations where you need to deal with asynchronous Apex. Asynchronous Apex is something which may not be in sync with something else. Okay. Common example can be any Apex that needs to run in the backend asynchronously. Asynchronously means whenever it, finds the resources available for that Apex to get executed, it will get executed at that point of time. Now with synchronous Apex, the problem is that if you want to run the Apex now, it should either execute now or it should get cancelled. Synchronous means that, right? If I click on a button now, either the Apex should get executed now, or if the resources are not available for that Apex to get executed, it should get cancelled. So that's the thing. That's one challenge with the synchronous Apex. Second thing is, in synchronous Apex, you always need something to happen before the Apex can get executed. So either you should go and click on the execute button of anonymous code block, or you should go and load the page, or you should go and click on the button. So there's something for the end user to do, right? What if I just want the Apex to execute automatically without me doing anything? Okay, so that will also fall under asynchronous Apex. So under asynchronous Apex, there are four things that we are going to talk about. There are four ways of executing Apex asynchronously. One is a future method. Second is a queueable Apex. Third is a schedulable Apex. Fourth is a batch Apex. Okay, the four ways of executing Apex asynchronously means without uh, a proper synchronization with some other user, or without the, in some cases, without even the user doing anything, the Apex can get executed, and it will get executed asynchronously whenever the resources become available, right? So we will start with the future method first. What's a future method? Before we talk about future method, let's understand a normal method in Salesforce. What does a normal method do in Salesforce? You have written a method. This is the method. The end user calls this method. Okay. This is a synchronous method. So let's say you are here. You send a request to execute this method. This method will either execute instantly or will get cancelled. Let's say a page load, you're trying to load a page. So on that page load, the get methods get executed, right? So what will happen? The get method will either get executed or it will not get executed. One of these two things will happen, right? You click on a button, page reference method, either that should work at that point of time or it will not work at that point of time, right? So this is how a normal method works, but a future method is slightly different. Future method, if it is not able to execute at that point of time due to resources not being available, then it will just go and stand in the queue. It does not get cancelled. A future method, a normal method either will get executed or will get cancelled. A future method will, if it is not being, if it is not able to get executed, it's gonna go and wait in the queue. वो line में जाके खड़ा हो जाएगा and it will wait. When the resources become available, it will get executed at that point of time. Fine. So that's what a future method is.
Hmm.
Okay. So a future method runs in the background asynchronously. No matter when you call that method, if it does not find the resources available, it will run in the background asynchronously. It will wait for the resources to become available. And as a very nice gentleman, it will wait for its turn to come. The moment the resources become available, then it will get executed. Okay. And it will give priority to the synchronous methods, because synchronous methods are more important. They are the high priority because that's where either it should get executed or it will get cancelled. That's where the end user is waiting for things to happen, right? So synchronous Apex is high priority, but asynchronous Apex will get executed a little later maybe, but it will get executed, right? So that's what a future method is. So a future method runs in the background asynchronously. You can call a future method for executing long running operations. So if you feel that there is a long running operation where there are too many things which need to happen, there is too much of update which is going to happen in the database, and this is your resources might run out, you can use that as a future method. In that case, the method will not try to get executed at that point of time. It will wait for the resources to become available, and when the resources become available, that's when it gets executed. Or a new operation you would like to run on its own thread on its own time. Each future method is queued and executes when system resources become available, right? To define a future method, okay, so far whatever methods we have written, they are all normal methods. synchronous methods. Okay, then how do I make a method as a future method? To make a method as a future method, you just have to annotate the method with this particular at future annotation. Fine. And a future method should always be a void method. It should not return anything. And the logic is pretty simple, right? Why do you think future method should be a void method and it should not return anything? Why do you think it has to be a void method always?
Because we don't need that thing to, we're not calling any information back, or we're not requiring any information as of then.
Yeah,
For that
and
Because
purpose,
I
only the
think,
if it
methods
is a
where
normal
you,
request, yeah.
yeah, and only the methods where you do not need a return, that's where you can execute future method, right? Let's say there is a method which has to give a return to you. You as an end user, you clicked on plus and you are waiting for a response. If that method is future method, then what will happen? You will not get a response, right? So any method where the end user is actually expecting a return and based on that return something else will happen, that method I cannot make future method. Why? Because that's where someone is waiting for to get some value which will be used somewhere else. So non-void methods cannot be future method. Only void methods can be future method where no return is expected. So that other things, other people, other users, nothing is getting affected. Whatever is the code in that particular future method, that will get executed whenever it gets time. No one is waiting for a return to come. Got it? So it's more like if I ask you a question and if I'm asking a question and I'm expecting an answer, so you cannot give me an answer in future. You cannot say that, oh, mera jab marzi karega, I will give you the answer. That way, because I will keep on waiting for that, right? But yeah, if I give you some task and that's something which you'll have to do and you'll have to keep it, then you can do it today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow. So we are all not waiting for it. Got it? So that's the simple logic for a future method. Right? Only void methods will be uh, future methods. Okay, and if you have to define a future method, it has to be void. It cannot have a return type. So that's how it should be written. It should be future void method. Okay. Apart from being a void method, if you have to pass any parameter in that method, if you have to supply any parameter into that method, that cannot be of S object type. That can only be primitive data type. Okay. The specified parameter can only be primitive or arrays of primitive or collections of primitive. So it cannot, a future method cannot use an S object as a parameter. Now think about what can be the reason for that. Why do you think we cannot supply S object as a parameter for that method?
Because we can't keep information waiting on as objects, and like we discussed before, this is something
Yeah, but
that
here the
we don't need a written
situation,
thing back. Yeah.
yeah, but here on the same lines, it's a little different from the previous one. Here, what is happening? There, it was you were waiting for the value. Here, what is happening? You're supplying the value of an S object. Okay, what happens with an S object? The value of the S object can change. S object is what? It's a record, let's say, or a set of records. Now, let's say I'm talking about one record. I have supplied one record as a parameter for future method. Okay. Value of that S object can change anytime. You can go and make changes. Correct. Now, what will happen? The moment this future method is called and the moment it is executed, there is a time lag between that. That's what we understand. So whenever a future
Yeah.
method is called, it will wait for the resources to become available and then it will get executed. Now this future, there can be a time difference between these two things. There has to be because it's a future method. So it is possible that you call the method now it gets executed after 4 hours. In the meanwhile, if someone goes and makes changes in the database or updates that record, then the future method will still execute on the old data because that has been passed as a parameter. So let's say 5 p.m. you called the method, 5 p.m. you passed a record which the name of the record was Dell. 9 p.m. the method actually gets executed after 4 hours due to resources were not available. In this meanwhile, someone has made changes to that record. Instead of Dell, they have made it Dell India Private Limited. Fine. But my method is actually still holding the old value. It has the value as Dell. What will the method do? It will go and update Dell India Private Limited with Dell. So your database again gone back to the previous place. So the changes which were done, this will again go and override that. So this way your database will become inconsistent. Got it? So S object cannot be supplied. S object cannot be supplied as a parameter for a future method because S object can change between the time when the method is called and the time when it is actually executed.
Hello?
Hello,
Hello?
Rachna, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay. I've just joined. Actually, I just checked the link. Did I miss anything?
No, you did not miss anything. You can just be on mute. And
Okay. All right.
yeah, okay. So got the concept. So that's how it works. All right. The future method will not have S object as parameter because if it has S object as parameter, there is a possibility that the value in the S object changes between the time when it actually was called and when it gets executed. So then we will have a problem with the consistency of the database. So someone who has changed the database in between will again find that the database got back to the previous position, right? So that's the concept of a future method. Method with a future annotation cannot take S object or object as argument. The reason why S object can't be passed as argument to future method is the S object might change between the time. So that's what we were talking. So S object might change between the time you call the method and the time it executes. In this case, the future method will get the old S object value and might override them. So it will take the old S object value and override the new one. So that will end up in inconsistency of the database. Got it? Okay. So then what is the solution to this? If I have to work with, because I'm talking about Salesforce, most of my methods are written to do something on the records, on the S object, right? Whatever methods you're writing, you're actually trying to write those methods for doing something on the S objects. In some cases, you actually need to, pass some record as parameter. Then what do you think you should be doing? So the solution to that is, there's a very simple solution to that. To work with S object that already exists in the database, pass the S object ID instead. Okay, so instead of passing the S object, pass the ID of the S object or the ID of the records. So it should be like this.
What exactly are future methods?
Future method is another way of calling Apex, right?
Okay.
And it's used for methods which can execute in future also. Instead of executing right now, it can execute in future also. Right?
Okay. All right.
Okay. So let's say I'm talking about public void method one, and here I'm talking about passing a parameter account A. Okay. Now I cannot pass account A as a parameter here because it's an S object. And as I said, A can have a name and everything else, all other values, which can get updated by the time, between the time when it is called and when it gets executed. So what is the solution? I still want to work with account A. With the future method, I still want to work with it. So the solution will be, instead of uh, passing the S object, basically what I can do is I can pass ID, let's say whatever, AID, whatever. So instead of passing account A as the parameter, I can pass ID of the record as a parameter. Okay, what is the advantage by passing the ID of the record? ID of the record will not change, and ID is a primitive data type. Okay, so ID will not change for any particular record. All other field values can change for the record. ID is not going to change, right? So what will happen when you're supplying the ID is going to be constant, and whenever the method gets executed, at that time it can use the ID, and inside the method you can say count A equals, let's say, select name from count where ID equals AID. That means what happened? That is what will happen, that your name of the record or whatever value you are fetching, it is getting executed, or this is getting extracted only when the method is ready to execute. Got it? So the difference between this approach and this approach is that in this particular approach, you are getting the updated value exactly at the time when the method is ready to execute. Here, you are not working with the updated value. Fine. So parameter cannot be passed like this in a future method. Parameter should be passed like this in a future method, in case there is a scope of defining any parameter. Fine. Okay. So this is, a bit of challenge with the future method, because S object cannot be passed as a parameter. That becomes a bit of challenge. And there is one more challenge with the future method. The future method, seems to be a good option, but there is one more problem with the future method, that you do not have a mechanism to track the position of the future method. Let's say you've called a future method. Now you do not have a good way of figuring out whether your future method has got executed or it has not yet got executed. So status cannot be tracked. That's another challenge with the future method. So these are two big challenges. Definitely we can work with IDs and everything, but still, that's a challenge with future method. Second challenge is that the status cannot be figured out. So if you call a future method, and we understand that the future method will get executed when resources become available. So once you've called it, after that you do not have a way of going and tracking that what is the current position, execute ho gaya ki abhi bhi nahi hua. That's something we cannot figure out. Okay, keeping those things in mind, Salesforce has come up with the second thing, which is Queueable Apex. Talk about four things here, right? Future method, Queueable Apex. Now Queueable Apex is an enhanced way of executing future methods. How is Queueable Apex better than future method? First of all, let's understand what is Queueable Apex. Take control of your asynchronous Apex process by using Queueable interface. All right. This interface, what exactly Queueable interface will do? This interface will enable you to add jobs to the queue and monitor them. So this monitoring, I said, that was a problem with future method. You are not able to monitor. Queueable Apex allows you to monitor your job. So Queueable Apex adds Apex job in the job queue, and it gives you an ID of the job. Fine.
Gee, a question here.
Mhm.
You know how you mentioned with the future method,
Hmm.
you know how it actually queues if the time hasn't come yet for it to run or
Hmm.
execute. So then it becomes queuable, right? Um, so does it actually fall under the Queueable Apex sort of stuff, or that's totally a different thing?
Queueable Apex is a different approach. So let's understand what is Queueable Apex. You yourself will understand the difference. Future method is different. This is different, right? It is an enhanced way
Okay,
of executing future Apex, Apex in future. Fine.
okay.
So it is different from that. So a Queueable Apex uses a queueable interface. Achha, what is the job? What will this queueable interface do? It will add the job in the queue, and when you add the job in the queue, it will give you a job ID. Using that job ID, you can track and monitor the current status of the job. Whether the job has got executed, it is still pending, you can track that. So that's a good, that's a big advantage of Queueable Apex, which is an enhanced way of running your asynchronous Apex code compared to using future method. So, adding the job to the queue is an enhanced way. This is a better way of doing the same thing. See, my purpose is simple. I want my Apex code to get executed now or after 1 hour or after 2 hours whenever the resources become available. Correct? That's what my goal is. I have two approaches of doing that. First approach is through future method. Second is through queueable Apex. Future method does not give you a scope of monitoring things. Queueable Apex gives you the scope of monitoring things. So that's what we are talking here. So that's the reason why I'm saying that this is an enhanced way of running your asynchronous Apex code compared to your future method. Right? For Apex processes that run for a long time, such as extensive database operation, you can run them asynchronously by implementing the queueable interface and adding a job to the Apex job queue. In this way, your asynchronous Apex job runs in the background in its own thread and doesn't delay the execution of your main Apex logic. So advantage that you have is that because this is asynchronous Apex, it will run in the backend. So it's pretty similar to the future method concept also. So it will run in the backend and it will not affect your or it will not hamper your main Apex logic. Main Apex logic is all your synchronous Apex. Triggers, methods, get methods, they are the main Apex logic. Okay. Each queued job runs when system resources become available. Fine. Okay. So,
Sir, I have a question.
mhm.
Actually, Queueable Apex is an advanced version of the asynchronized Apex, wherein we can actually add jobs and then track
Way
them.
of
So,
enhanced way of executing asynchronous Apex. It's a different way.
asynchronized.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like it as an advance to the future methods. So, why they
Enhanced
have
way.
created future methods then? Because why it still exists then? Because there will be some work which would be done by future methods also.
Yeah. So understand the Queueable Apex a little more. You yourself will have answer to that.
Okay.
Fine. Okay.
Yeah.
So now, how do you write a Queueable Apex? Queueable Apex is not a method; it's a class. Okay. So when we say Queueable interface, it implements Queueable interface. It's basically a class. Okay. And on that class, you implement a Queueable interface. So what happens here is you should be writing to create a Queueable Apex. All that you have to do is you have to say public class, so Q class, and you have to implement the Queueable interface. So you'll have to say implements Queueable. Okay, so this is actually a class which implements Queueable interface. Now what does, as I told you, what does this particular interface do? It allows you to put the code in this class in the queue. It can be queued, it can be put in the queue, in the job queue.
Engineer,
Hello.
unable to see your screen.
Even I'm unable to see your screen.
Yeah.
It's just,
Now,
yeah, yeah.
now can you see it?
Yes.
So Queueable Apex is basically
The
a
syntax.
class. It's not a method. So you can write public class, whatever. So far we have been writing public class name. Here you have to do one more thing. If you want to make any class as queuable, you'll have to implement the queuable interface. This implement queuable basically makes the code queuable. Then this code can be in the job queue. Can you please mute, please? It can be put in the Apex job queue. Got it? So that's the advantage of putting this particular thing. Now, in the Queueable Apex, all that you have to do is you have to define a method public void execute. Name of the method has to be execute. And inside this method, you can write whatever code you want. Fine.
So we directly have to, okay, once we describe the class, so our code, then immediately we have to write this method.
It
And
has
then
to have
inside
a
this
execute
method,
method. Name of the method will always be execute in this case, and it has to be a
okay, so
void method.
whatever we write, whatever the logic is, or whatever we have to write is inside the code.
In the
Sorry,
method.
inside the execute method,
Right.
right?
Yes.
We cannot write directly in the class.
Directly
I
in the
mean to
class, you
say,
cannot write anything. You can just define
no,
variables
at least we
directly in the
can, yeah,
class.
define also.
No,
Define also we can.
variables you can define.
Okay,
Actual execution will happen with your execute method. Fine.
okay, okay. All right.
So your Queueable Apex should have this particular method called execute. Now, what we do, we will need to, once we have written whatever we want to execute, whatever you want to do. Once you have done this, you have uh, to execute this class or to execute this code, you have to uh, put this class into the Apex job queue. Fine. So for doing that, there is a method called system.enqueueJob. So if I do this, queue class, this line of code, if I call it from wherever I want, this particular method is gonna put this queue class into the Apex job queue. That's it. Got it? So this is how simple it is.
Okay.
So all that we have to do, we have to just go ahead, define the class, implement the queueable interface on the class. In the class, we need to have a method called execute method. That execute method will have whatever logic we want to execute, and we have to define to call that or to put that class or to put that code in the job queue. This is what we have to do. That's it. So this is the basic structure of it. All right. Now, okay. Before I get into talking about other stuff, so going back to Pankaj's question, why do we have the future method? So Pankaj, does this give you some idea about why still we have future method, or how future method is different from this? Definitely Queueable Apex is
Yeah,
an enhanced way, but whatever is the thing of future method that can be done with future method. It's a method. It can be a part of any class. This Queueable Apex is a complete class. It cannot be part of other class. Correct?
got it.
So it's more like though let's say a car is an advanced version of bicycle, but bicycle also has its some significance here. So that's how it is. So some places when you just want the code to be in a method, then you have to still use future method. Queueable Apex is where you're converting the entire class into queueable class. Okay.
Got it. Yeah.
Okay. So now let's talk about a few more advantages of our Queueable Apex. More advantages, I think, two things we have already talked about. One, it can be put in the queue and I can track the position. Second, S object can also be defined. Okay. So queuable jobs are similar to future methods in that they are both queued for execution. but they provide you with these additional benefits. Okay, so fundamentally both of them sound similar, but Queueable Apex has a few advantages. The advantage number one is whenever you put the job in the job queue, you get an ID for it. When you submit your job by invoking system.enqueueJob, this is the method which I was talking about. So when you submit it, you get the ID of the new job. It returns you the new job ID. Using that ID, you can track the progress of the that particular code or that particular job. Right? What is the status? Is it still pending or is it executed? That's the advantage. Fine. Which was not possible with the future method, as I told you. You can use this ID to identify your job and monitor its progress. That's one. Second is you can use non-primitive data types also, which means you can use S-objects also as data types. Your queueable class, because queueable Apex is not a method, it's a class. Okay, so it can contain member variables of non-primitive data type. So when I'm talking about defining variables inside the class, I can define them of any type. It can be of S-object type also, right? Because there it's not a parameter which is being passed. The complete class will be called whenever the complete class is ready to execute. That's only when your S object will take the value. So it will take most up-to-date value. Fine. So non-primitive data types can also be allowed. There should not be a problem here. That's the other advantage. There's one more advantage which is very important, which is chaining of jobs. Chaining jobs means sometimes you may have a requirement that you have two jobs in hand. Think about it. There's job 1. After job 1 is completed, you want to do job 2. Okay. Now what you can do in this case is you can have, let's say, two queueable Apex. You have created two queueable classes. There's job 1 and there's job 2. Alright. Now you want to make sure that job 2 gets executed only when job 1 has completed. When the job 1 has got done, then only you want to go and do the job 2. So with Queueable Apex, what can happen? You can chain one job into the other job. So in Queueable Apex 1, end of that code, what you can do, you can call the second Queueable Apex. So this is how it works, right? This is the structure, and this is how you write. And then you need to call this method to execute it, right? That's what we understand. Now think of a situation where I have two jobs. Let's say I have job 1 and the same way I have another job which is job 2 where I want to do something else. And I also want to make sure that job 2 starts only when job 1 has completed. Now if I put both of them in the job queue parallelly, then you never know which one gets executed first, right? Because if the resources become available for job 2 first, then it will get executed. So I don't want to put them parallelly. Fine. I want to make sure that job 2 gets executed only when job 1 is done. So all that I have to do is I can put in this code itself, I can put system dot enqueue job for job 2. Fine. Then what will happen when this code gets executed? After that, this method will call the job 2. So this is the chaining of jobs. I'm chaining the second job to the first Apex job. So once this code actually gets executed, then it will automatically call the second job and it will put that in the queue. Fine. And you will have to initiate the first one. So you just have to initiate the first one. You initiate the first one, job 1. Job 1, inside the job 1 I have put or I have called the job 2. Got it? So this way if you have a job 3, you put it here.
Jeet,
I've
got a question. Now if we write this system job queue here, okay, like the first one for job 2. still it will execute the code which is system.enqueue job new job one. Like, I just am confused with this. How will it I mean,
Sorry,
yeah.
what is the question? Repeat, please repeat.
Okay. Now, in this case, we are writing a code. Okay, we have written first job one, then we have written job two, and then we wrote the system.enqueue job new job one,
Hmm.
right?
See,
And then
this is
inside
before,
job,
no, before your confusion. This is a
yeah.
different class. I hope you understand
Okay.
this. This is a different class. This is a different class. Don't think that we are writing everything in one place. This is a different class. And
Okay.
this is a different thing where different piece of code where, which I'm doing to call class one. Okay, so these are
So
three
where are we
different
gonna
bodies.
write this third? Yeah. So where are we gonna write this third part?
This wherever you want. This is a piece of code. You can write it in a method. You can write it in an anonymous code block. Wherever you want. You just have to call this one line of code from wherever you want. Like system.job2, I have called from where? I've called it from job one. Right? So you can go and write it anywhere.
Yeah. Okay, but then how will it distinguish? Like, I have to call job one first and then job one, because it's not written inside the class or somewhere, right?
When you write a class,
Mm-hmm.
when you write a class, I hope you guys understand this much so far. When you have written a class, when you have written a method, to call that method, you definitely don't write inside that class only, right? टीवी का रिमोट टीवी के अंदर थोड़ी रहता है, टीवी का रिमोट तो बाहर रहता है ना,
Hmm.
obviously, right? You think calling that class should be written inside that class only? No, right?
No, इसीलिए तो पूछ रही हूँ, फिर ये जो रिमोट है, I mean this thing is
Okay,
there, तो
which
हम
one?
लोग कहाँ से उसको
वो
कॉल
कहीं पे भी
करेंगे?
हो सकता है ना, that can be anywhere, that it's just a line of apex. This can be called from a method, this can be called from a trigger, this can be called from an anonymous code block. So this particular line can be like for this second example, as you see, for job 2 I have written it inside this class, but I cannot write the same thing for job 1 here.
Okay.
I can call job 2 from job 1, but I cannot call job 1 from job 1. So that has to be, for your understanding, that has to be
Okay.
outside this particular class anywhere. That's one line of Apex code you can execute anywhere.
Okay.
Like,
Okay.
for example, on a trigger, you just want to say, yesterday we were writing that, okay, if this happens, throw an error. Instead of throwing error, you want to call this enqueue job. Call it. That's an Apex code. You can call it
Okay.
from anywhere. So you got my
Okay.
point?
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I got it now.
Fine. So that's how it is. All right.
Okay.
So this is the advantage. So in case you guys are getting confused with chaining job, just forget about this. You guys, once you do one or two examples, you will understand the syntax. Don't worry about what I've written here. Just understand the concept of chaining job. The concept of chaining job is that I can call the second job at the end of the first job. This is chain banta hai na? So I'm just hooking it to the first job so that when the first job gets completed, then we will call the second job. Fine. So that's it. Now what will happen? You have written these two classes. For example, in this particular case, you have written these two classes. You call this method from anywhere. You can write an anonymous code block for this and you can call it. What will this do? It will execute job one first, right? Now this will execute the job one. Job one, when it gets executed, it will call job two. Job two is going to go here. It will get executed. So you don't have to call job 2 separately. You have just called job 1. Job 1 is calling job 2 automatically. Job 2 can call job 3. Let's say job 3 is some other class. It will automatically call that class. So this ways you can have a long chain. Got it? You just have to
Can I?
initiate one quick second. So you just have to initiate the
Yeah.
first one, and after that the consecutive ones will keep on happening. In case you have that long execution required, multiple jobs, one after other in case that's required. Most of the times you will be working with one of the jobs only. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what I was asking is if I initiate job second first, then it will go on for job 3, job 4, job 5. One will not be initiated.
Yes, yeah, but so if you have started from job 2, so it comes here. So no
Yeah,
one is calling job 1 then.
yeah.
Got it? So wherever you want to start. So that's how it is. Okay. So that's about Queueable Apex. Now, if I just have to write a Queueable Apex and check it how to enqueue it and everything, all that you have to do is just go to, as I said, it's a class. Where do you write it? You write it in a class. So just go to setup. Just do a simple example. Go to develop Apex classes. Click on new. Public class, whatever name you want to give it, class. They should implement Queueable interface. And as I said, it should have public execute void method, public void execute global context. Let's say this is the code I want to execute. Account equals ABCD insert a. Fine. So whatever you want to execute, you write it inside this. Your Queueable class is ready. Now whenever you want to execute it, you have to put this code into the queue. तो लाइन में लगा देने का. तो लाइन में लगाने के लिए क्या, what is the method we have? System.enqueueJob, right? This is the method that I have to use. Okay. Now this method returns an ID. This method returns an ID. So what I have to do? I just have to write this line of code to put it in the job queue. I have to say ID, job ID equals system dot enqueue job. In which class you want to put in the queue? What's the name of the class? Queue underscore class. That's it. Now this line needs to be written somewhere. The moment this line is called or executed, my sister job will be put into the queue. So let's do it through anonymous code block. So you can go to developer console, come here, right? Okay, I've written this line. I just want to execute this line. Okay, click on execute. So what should that code do? It should put my Apex code in the job queue. Okay, and I should be able to track and monitor the progress of it. What is the current status? Where will you do that? Now this has got into the job queue. How will I monitor? Just go to setup. Towards the end, you will find jobs. Come here and see your Apex jobs. See, Queueable Apex status is completed. Got it? So this is the job ID. And this was a small one, and moreover, because it's a developer edition, so the resources are available, no one is using it. So it got executed. Let me just go and check if the account actually got created or not. Yeah, it got created. So the code got executed, right? So here you have a clear understanding that okay, job type was queueable, and the status is completed. The Apex class from where it came was queue class. This is a job ID. So you are able to track it. Got it? So that's how it works. And now whatever is the code written inside that execute method will get executed through this Queueable Apex. Clear? It's very simple. The only difference is in how it is getting executed. So a normal method will get executed or will get cancelled if the resources are not available. A Queueable Apex will wait for the resources to become available. That's it. Okay. Now, but Queueable Apex needs to be called from somewhere, which means whenever you want to execute it, this code needs to be executed. Correct? Now, how do you do it, from where you do it, that's up to you, but still this needs to be done. In case I have an Apex code and I want to execute it automatically every Friday, then there is another way of calling that Apex code, that is schedulable Apex, or we also call it Apex scheduler. Apex scheduler or schedulable Apex, one and the same thing. Okay. Schedulable Apex is even more simpler. It's exactly the way Queueable Apex is written. Schedulable Apex is also a class. It implements schedulable interface. Like Queueable Apex implements Queueable interface. This implements schedulable interface. The rest everything is same. So all that you have to do is you have to write public class as class, and you have to say implements schedulable. So that's the only difference. Inside it, you again have to have a method which will be called execute. Public void execute method you have to have here inside this, and this is where you will write the code. After you have written the class, you just have to go ahead and define the schedule for it. Like in Queueable Apex, you have to call that method system.enqueueJob, then only it will be put into the job queue, right? For schedulable Apex, you don't even have to do that. You just have to define the schedule that every Friday, every Thursday I want to execute it. It will automatically execute every Thursday on a defined time. Fine. So let's do this. Go to this. Let me copy this entire code and use the same code in schedulable also. Change the name of the class. Interface will change here. Instead of queueable interface, we are using schedulable interface. Okay. Okay, that's it. So writing wise, the way it is being written is exactly the same. Okay, why I want you to focus so much on the similarities, because so that you don't have to keep too many things in mind. So method name will be execute. It has to be a void method. The method name has to be execute only. You cannot change it. Whatever code you want to execute, you just write that code here. Just that instead of queueable interface, you make it schedulable interface. What is the job of the schedulable interface for the class? The job of the schedulable interface is that this class can now be scheduled. A class which implements queueable interface, that class can be queued. The class which uses schedulable interface can be scheduled. Save it. Now, how will I define the schedule for this Apex code? To define the schedule for it, all that you have to do is you just have to go to Apex classes. The code is ready. Now you just have to define the schedule for it. So just go to Apex classes. Here you will find schedule Apex at the top. Click on schedule Apex, and then you can give a job name to this, whatever you want. My schedule Apex, whatever you want to call it. You have to select which class you want to execute, want to schedule. So only the class which implement that schedulable interface will be visible here. So right now I just have one. So I'll pick that class. How do you want to execute it? Weekly, monthly? Okay, I'll say weekly, every Friday. Let's say at 9 p.m. Okay. Define a start date and end date for it. Starts on 15th November. I want to continue it till 31st December, or till whatever time you want. So your schedule is defined. Now, just one small thing here. Exact start time will depend on the job queue activity. So because ultimately it's asynchronous Apex. Schedulable is also asynchronous Apex, and it will also wait for the resources to become available. Though you have mentioned 9 p.m. on Friday 9 p.m. if the resources are not available, so it can get delayed, but it will not get cancelled. So the concept is still same. 9 p.m. is when it will be initially put in the queue. If the resources become available at that time only, it will get executed. If not, then it will wait for its turn. Let's see. Fine. So this has become a scheduled Apex. How will you monitor a scheduled Apex? Same way, just scroll down in the setup menu, go to jobs, and you can click on scheduled jobs this time. You can click on scheduled jobs and you will be able to see this. My schedule Apex submitted. Next scheduled run is on 20th November. Fine, it has not yet started. Next scheduled run is on 20th November. Go to Apex job. See, status is queued. So it will appear in both the logs, in the scheduled Apex log as well as in the Apex job queue log, because this is also in the queue. So the next execution, which is on 20th November. So this is in queue, queued, waiting for execution. Fine, clear. So overall things are same for a queueable Apex and a schedulable Apex, but just that the way they are being called is different. Queueable Apex is up to you. So any code that you feel is for which you do not have a defined frequency, that's a one-off situation. You can write it as a queueable Apex, call it whenever you want. So if you have a code which you feel that you will execute it once today and you're not very sure when you need to execute it next time, it can be in 2 days, it can be after 2 months. So you put it in queueable Apex so that you can queue it, use the enqueue job method to put it in the queue whenever you want. Anything that you are very, very sure that, okay, every weekday or every month I'll execute it, for which you have a defined frequency, that's where a recurring job basically should be put into the schedulable Apex. And those ad hoc jobs or job requests should be put in Queueable Apex. Correct? Let me know if there's any question or any doubt here so far. You're good? Great. Now, the next concept that we're going to talk about is batch Apex. So, batch Apex is a little different from what we have done in Queueable and Schedulable Apex. Queueable and Schedulable Apex exactly have the same structure. I want you to keep the structure in mind. Implements Queueable, method name, void execute. That's it. After that, whatever code you have to write, that's something that depends on that particular situation. Schedulable Apex implements schedulable void execute method. Okay. Now let's understand the structure of a batch Apex. Even before we understand the structure of a batch Apex, let's understand what exactly is a batch Apex. Batch Apex is, as the name says, any code that needs to be executed in batches. Okay. Now we have certain limitations with Salesforce. How many records can be updated in one go or in one transaction, and how many records can be retrieved in one query. So for everything we have a limitation. We'll talk about that in our next session. So for now, just understand this, that we have a limitation. Like anything has a limitation, correct? Anything in this world has a limitation. Now, when you are trying to process the data which is more than the limitation, then the best option available to you to do is do it in batches. Okay. So let's say, think about it. You have a car, and that car has a seating capacity of, let's say, 5 people. 5 people can sit in that. Okay. And you have to, this is point A, this is point B. Okay. You have one car. You have to take 4 people from point A to point B. What will you do, Pankaj? There are 4 people who need to go from point A to point B. You have a car with seating capacity 5. What will you do?
I'll take 4 people to point B using car
You'll ask
because
all of them to
capacity is
sit.
5.
Capacity is 5.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Now, Rachna, you have 20 people who need to go from point A to point B. What will you do? Rachna, you there?
Ola cab.
No. Naren, 20 people standing
Multiple
in point
trips,
A.
multiple trips, 5 times.
Batches,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Same way, I have, let's say in my database, I have a position where I am in point A, certain stage of database. I want uh, point B of the database. There are, let's say, 50,000 records which need to be updated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and let's say there is a limitation that there are a certain number of records which I can update in one go. Then what will I do? Definitely the batches.
Then you have to repeat the thing. Yep.
Repeat the thing.
Batches.
Correct. So that's what a batch Apex does. Batch Apex will do the processing in small batches, so that whatever you are trying to do, see, there are two options. One is that you keep on doing it manually, that okay, first of all, take the first 1000 records or 500 records and then process them, and then again tomorrow you come write one more method and again process 500. Or you instruct Salesforce that, see, this is what you have to do, and you can do it in batches. Don't worry, you can do it in batches. Now it's the headache of salesforce.com and Apex to break the data in batches, small batches, and process it batch by batch. Definitely it's going to be
Jeet,
a long running operation. Yeah.
okay, Jeet, a quick question here. Just in terms of running it or manually typing it or manually writing it again, executing it daily, why can't we put that as a recurring um, as a recurring class or recurring you know, code where it actually runs and takes the next 1,000 sort of thing is.
A very good question. Now there are two things to this. There are two points to this. Point number one is
Yeah.
a recurring thing is happening on the same stuff.
Oh, okay.
Fine.
So it'll go
Recurring
bring
is
only
like,
1,000 people, same 1,000 people.
yeah, recurring is like, you're taking me for, from point A to B 20 times. So that's not the requirement. You need to take in the
Okay.
next step. You need to take Pankaj, and in the next step you need to take Rachna. So that's the thing. That's what you need. That's one
Right.
point. Second, if we
Okay.
are talking about scheduled Apex itself is what is it? Um, an asynchronous Apex, right? So execution gets delayed a little. Let's say, in case we have written
Mm-hmm.
our code in such a way that we can do it through scheduled Apex, but if I try to do it in multiple scheduled Apex executions, then it will take too long for us to execute one small thing.
Right.
So from
Okay.
those two point of views, the first one being definitely more important, that recurring is repeating the same thing, but we don't want to repeat. We want to
Right.
execute it for the entire set of data in batches.
It is. Okay.
So now in the batch Apex, we have understood. Now batch Apex definitely needs a little bit of more instructions than as compared to what the queuable and the schedulable Apex needed. So in batch Apex, the simplest part is that you have to write a class. Okay, public class, whatever name you want to give it, and it will implement an interface. What will be the name of the interface?
Batch.
Batch, batchable.
Batch Apex.
Okay, batchable.
Okay. Batchable. Okay.
So it implements an interface which is called database.batchable. Not batchable only, it's called database.batchable.
Okay.
Now inside this you will have three methods. Okay, you don't have one method, you have three methods. Method one is
Mm-hmm.
start, method two is execute. Execute method we have seen, we have used in other two things also. Method three is finish. Okay, start method is
Mm-hmm.
used for preparing the data for execution. So start method's job is basically to prepare the data for execution, how the data should be executed, right? Execute method is for actual execution. Finish method is for performing any action that you want to perform at the end of all batch execution. So start method will do the data preparation. Execute
Mm-hmm.
method will actually do the execution. Finish method is gonna perform any action that you want to do at end of all batches. So let's say now let's go back to that example that we were talking about. That you have, let's say, 20 people who need to go from A to B. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So start method is basically segregating those 20 people into batches. First trip who will go, second trip who will go, third trip who is going to go. So breaking them into batches. That's what start method is going to do. Okay. Execute is actually carrying people from here to here. So this execute will get executed 5 times, right? Or 4 times. So this execute method is going to run multiple times, each time for one batch. And finish method can be, let's say, after bringing all these people here, let's say you have to make a phone call. So that is the finish method. Fine. So same way, start method, if you're talking about the database, start method is actually preparing the data, forming those batches. Execute is actually doing the execution. Finish is anything that you want to do at the end of all batch execution. So when all the batches have got executed, let's say you want to send an email to someone, or you just want to call some other method because this batch is complete. You just want to call some other Queueable Apex or some other batch Apex or something like that. So that's something which should be written in the finish. Like for Queueable Apex, we saw a chaining of job. If I want to chain some other job with this batch job, then that job should be called in the finish method because execution has already got done for this thing. Now you can call other job. Got it? So this is the basic structure for it. This will basically be a void method. It will not execute is anyhow a void method. Finish is also going to be a void method. It will also not return anything. Start method will have a return type because this will prepare the data and it will supply the batches to void to the execute method. So start method will have a return type of database.query locator. Okay, we'll come to that part. So are we clear on the structure of it? Let me know if there is any difficulty understanding this much. Start, finish, start, execute, finish, three methods, implement batchable interface. If there is any question on this, please let me know. Else we are good to start writing the code. We can do a small example and see it how it works.
Clear.
Okay.
Clear.
So let's create a class again. To create a batch Apex, just go to setup, develop, Apex classes, write it. Achha, just one small thing. Uh, to call the batch Apex, you have to use this code system.execute batch. Okay, like we did system.enqueue job, same way. So first of all, we'll start with writing the batch class. Okay. Alright, so we'll just break for 2 minutes and we'll continue. Okay, so we'll start writing the class for batch Apex. It's going to be public class batch class or whatever you want to name it implements database dot batchable. Okay, and then it should have 3 methods defined, right? So we are going to work with 3 methods. So let's say let's write a small batch Apex which will go and update a certain field in an object. Okay, let's say we want to update the description field of the object. Okay, we just want to go and update the description field of account object. Okay, so it should pick all the records and it should go and update all those records. Now first thing we'll have to do is we have to just go ahead and start with the start method. So you will define public database query locator.
Job? What is the job?
Sorry, what is
What is the job? Bad job?
the batch job?
Yeah. What?
Now let's say you want to go and update all the account records with a certain value. Let's say description of the description of all the accounts, right?
Okay. Okay. Got it.
So first thing that you have to do is you have to define the start method. Start method has a return type database.queryLocator. Now this database.queryLocator will automatically take your query. Okay, in the query you are basically supplying which records you want to update or modify or work on, right? Database.queryLocator will automatically form batches of them and return the batches. So the
Okay.
start method returns this. Okay, database.queryLocator method is actually going to take the big chunk of data and it will form the batches out of it. Okay, it needs a query as an input. It needs to take a query, and out of that query it will see if it's a bigger set of records, then Salesforce can actually process at once, it will form batches out of it. Fine. So write the start method, database dot batchable context. You have to say return database dot get query locator, and this is where you have to write your query. So query is basically which all records you want to process. That's it. Okay. Which set of data you want to work on. So you can say select name description from account. If you write this, it's gonna work on all the records from account. If you want to, put some logic, where clause you can put. All right. Now that's what my start method has to do. So we have defined the start method. Now in the execute method, you have to go and specify what exactly you want to do on this data. What do you want to do with this data? That needs to be written in execute method. So execute method is void. So
Void. Yep.
no problem with that. Okay. Now here I am passing this parameter scope. Scope is going to be one set of one batch of the records which have been supplied from here. Okay, so that's again something it will automatically understand, and it will take scope as one set of data out of the all the batches. So first batch, second batch, that is. And this execute method, as we have said that execute method is going to repeat. Okay.
Jeet, a quick question here.
Mm-hmm.
How would this class know how many, what is the number of data that it needs to select, or is there a predefined number of data that it
No, see,
already selects? Like,
what you are doing is you are giving it, you are supplying which data you want to process.
correct, correct.
Fine. Now,
Yes.
your database dot query locator, get query locator is actually gonna
Yep.
work with its own limitation. Got it?
Oh,
So basically
okay.
what will happen, whatever number of records which can be processed in one go, it will automatically form a batch of that and the next set of records.
Acha.
So the first 1000 records will be taken in the first batch,
Acha. Okay.
and from 1001 to
Okay.
2000 it will automatically form the second batch. So that's the
Does it
job of it.
vary? Does it vary from class to class that we're going to write, or whatever? Yeah, of course, it will be the same. Get query locator. Okay.
Get query locator is actually, it has its own, once we talk about the governor limit, that's where I'm actually going to talk
Okay.
a little more about it, and all
Okay. No
other
problem.
limits also. Fine. We're
Okay.
going to talk about some other limits also which will make you understand that part. So good
Okay.
thing about get query locator is it will automatically see that okay, this is where the limit is. So the way
And then it
you,
will
you
break it
keep on
into
putting
classes.
people in the car, and the moment it sees that it's a car full of here, it will say okay, fine, stop, go process this. Acha, you guys will go in the next batch.
Okay.
So that's what it's actually gonna do. Fine. Okay.
Yep.
Now I just want to go and update the, let's say, description of all the account records. So I say s object, or I can say
Account.
account A, because this is a batch, multiple records I need to update. So I can say account A in scope. For this, I can say as dot put, sorry, a dot put description dated using batch. Update. Yeah, this is closed. Correct. Okay. So in this batch, let's say I'm trying to go and update the description of all the accounts to this particular value. Updated using batch. So now what it will do, it will update description of all the accounts to this particular value, right? And finish method, I will just keep the finish as nothing. Public void finish. Just start this method and close this method. So we will not put anything in the finish method. You can just leave it blank also. Okay, fine. So we'll look into the error later. But first of all, let's see that what we have written and what we are trying to do. So we are trying to form batches of records from account, and then we are trying to update them, update the description of them to this particular value, right? But there's a little change that I will do on this. Here I have hard coded the value. I have hard coded the field name also, right? Which means this code will always work for account description field, and this value will be updated, correct? I will, rather than hard coding, I want to make these as variables so that the end user at the time of execution, he has the option of defining what value he wants to update it to and which field he wants to update, which object he wants to update. Fine. So for that I'm gonna define 3 variables, and I also want to define a variable for the query. Now query is also hard coded, right? So instead of hard coding these values, I just want to make these variables so that it can vary, and the end user will have the scope of defining what exactly he wants to do. So I'll go ahead with defining a string called value, one more string called field, one more string for query. Okay, so I've defined 3 variables. Now go ahead and remove the hard-coded value. Instead of this, I am writing query. Okay, so I'm calling this variable here. Whatever is the value for this variable, that's what will be the query. For this object A in scope, I will say A dot put. So field name I will not mention. Instead of field name, I'm gonna use the variable field, and instead of value, I'm gonna use the variable value. Fine. Now since we have defined these variables, I also have to define a constructor which will take the values of these variables from the end user. So I will say public batch class string v string f string q, and here value equals v, field equals f, query equals q. Okay, so I've defined a constructor which takes 3 parameters v, f and q, and then I'm setting them to my variables, right? So these 3 things will be supplied by the end user v, f and q v, f and q will be assigned to these variables which I'm using in the code. Got it? So that's what my code is. Now all that I have to do is I just have to go and execute this batch. The code is ready and I just have to go and execute this batch. Line number 25 has an error. 25. What is the error in 25? Semicolon is missing. Save it. Yeah. Code is ready. Right? Now to execute the batch code, what is the method name I told you? Execute batch, right? And it's not system.execute batch, it's database.execute batch. Okay, and you have to say new batch, whatever name of the class, and here you have to give the parameters vfq. Okay, so this is what I have to call. I can call it the same way I called the Queueable Apex, and this also returns an ID, batch job ID, Apex job ID it will return. So you will have to write ID job ID equals this. So this is what you have to write. But there is one small thing missing, that I have to somewhere supply the value of these things also, right? Because I have made these variables, I will have to supply the value of these, correct? So I can just go and say string q equals select name, industry, description from account. So I have supplied the value for the query. Now I could have written the query inside the code also. That's what I showed you, that we can write the query inside the code also. But if you write the query inside the code, only difference was that becomes a static query. That code will always execute for that query. But now you are, at the time of execution, you have the flexibility of changing the query. Correct? String f equals description. Now here also you have the flexibility of editing any field. Instead of description, if you want to execute this for industry, you can do that, or for the type you can do that, and you can write.
Can we add two fields over there? Description as well as industry at a time?
You can, but then you will need one more, that put. So
Yeah,
field 1, field 2, you can do that, and you can have one more put here. Correct? So that's it.
got it.
And value, what value you want to update it to? Just go and define that. Updated new batch. Let's see. So now this is the code that you have to execute. Copy, and then we can execute it from anonymous code block. Debug, you can execute. See, so I've defined which query I want to, for which set of data I want to run this process. That's in the query. Which field I want to update, what value I want to update in that field, and then I have supplied all these things, and I call database.execute batch. Let me execute it. Done. Where will you monitor what is the current status? Again, go to Apex jobs. Batch Apex completed how many batches? One batch. Because you do not have too many records. So it automatically put all those records in one batch and complete it. Batches processed one. This is the idea of the job. Let's go and see if the accounts have got updated to what I was actually trying to do. See, description of all the accounts have become updated using batch. Fine. So this batch Apex is a lot of time used for doing the updates on the database, something that you want to change, something that you want to update, that sort of thing. Got it? Any difficulty understanding the batch Apex?
Jeet, I think
Hmm.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but I was sort of lost after you said you wanted to introduce the three variables,
Mhm.
and from then on it went really fast. I thought I'll wait until the end and then just advise
Did
you.
you understand before that?
I understood before that,
So
which is up
what we were
till
doing is,
um, getting the update using batch Apex, updated using batch Apex. Until then, it was all good. Soon after that, I
the
wanted to
variables is
introduce
where
the
you got confused, no? Don't worry.
yeah variables. So what options can we see? What was the end result, and why were we giving the choice for the end users to do that? I didn't quite understand that.
No, the point is that so when you're writing a batch Apex, why
Hmm.
would you write a batch Apex?
To make any changes in the data, as you just said before.
Okay,
Um,
correct.
yeah,
Now make any
yeah.
changes will it always happen on the same field?
Sorry, will it
Will it
always
always
happen on
happen
the
on the
same
same
field?
field?
No,
Right?
not the same field. It will happen on different fields. Yes.
Different fields. Right? Today I want to make changes in the industry field. After 1 week I might
Yes.
want to make changes in the let's say description field. After a week I might have a
Yeah.
requirement of updating the type field.
Name
Correct?
field. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, if you go and hard code the value of the field in the code itself, so what we have
Right.
done is, if I go back to the code, if we go back to the code, what we did earlier, I mean, I intentionally did it just for you guys to understand this. If I hard code the value here, then what will happen?
Right.
This program will become dedicated only for description field. It cannot be used for
Correct.
any other field. Correct?
Correct.
Then what
Correct.
happens? Then there is a problem. And tomorrow, if you have to wait
Yes.
for industry, then are you going to write one more batch Apex, or are you going to go
No.
and edit this code again and again? That's again, not a very wise idea, right?
Right. Right.
So for that reason, instead of this, what I have done, sorry, instead of putting this description thing, the field,
Mm-hmm.
hard coding the field, what I've done is I've defined a variable called field. And when someone is executing it, at that time, that person has the option of defining which field he wants to. So this field is just a string variable. And here you are supplying the value for which field you want to do it. Don't you think this is better? So if you write it industry here, then it gets executed for industry. Got it?
Okay. Yes. Yes.
That's
So
it.
as I mean, where do I see that on the Salesforce? Like, we went and saw in the accounts field where we could see that, okay, the hardcore result or the outcome that we typed has actually appeared. So I mean, where is the string F or Q or V? Um,
For string, we gave the value description, right?
mm, 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 mm.
So that's the reason why it updated the description field, and that's what we saw.
Acha, okay.
So whatever field you update, you have to go and check that string is what. This is a temporary holder,
Yes.
right?
Oh, so
It actually has
use
a
that.
field name, and you have to go and check that field name which you have updated.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make things clear?
Yes, so let's say in future if I want to change industry field, so I still have to go to that code and then change it to
Why will you go to that code?
industry.
Your batch class is saved. While you're trying to execute it, how did you execute it? How did you execute
Sorry,
it?
say that again, please. Say that again, please. While I'm
While you are trying to execute, how are you executing it? From the anonymous code window, right? So in that
okay,
anonymous code window, instead of if you want to, here I have specified that I want to update description field. Instead of description field, you
okay,
just go and write some other field name. You write industry here.
okay,
You write something else here. Then this code will work for updating all the industry to technology or
okay.
whatever you want.
Oh, okay, okay. Now I get it. So, so the batch Apex code that we wrote before, and by giving the string options, it kind of, so
It becomes
moving forward,
dynamic.
I would be using only anonymous. Okay, dynamic, and then anonymously, I can just write a code and then change it instead of
That's it.
going into the code.
That's that's
Simply. Okay,
only thing
okay,
that you have to mention is here. Here you will give an input
okay.
which field you want to update and that field will get updated. You
Exactly.
don't have to
Okay,
go to
okay.
that particular code and class and
Code and do
anything
all
such
that.
as that.
Okay, now I see the link.
That's
Okay, okay, okay. Clarified.
all right.
Yes.
Okay. So that's about the batch epics.